Have you ever heard of The Outlaws of the Marsh? It is one of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature. We create a social network of the main characters in this novel. First, let's share with you a quick overview of the novel. Set in the Song dynasty, the novel tells the story of a group of 108 heroes who gradually gather at Liangshan Marsh to fight the corrupt government. They come from various backgrounds: farmers, scholars, and even ex-officials. For various reasons, they join Liangshan one after another and eventually form a large cluster. The formation of the heroes' network is a complex process, involving changes in the core members and shifts in the consciousness of the personnel. We want to explore how this large cluster formed and how power shifted within it. The novel has 100 chapters, with chapters 40 and 71 being 2 key points. Before chapter 40, the heroes' network is just beginning to form. After chapter 40, the number of heroes in Liangshan grows quickly, and by chapter 71, all heroes have gathered in Liangshan. Based on this structure, we built 2 weighted undirected networks using the first 71 chapters. The first network is constructed from chapters 1 to 40, and the second covers chapters 41 to 71. Before creating the networks, we built a character dictionary with names and nicknames of the characters. We identified the names of the heroes in each sentence and assumed those appearing together were related. Through this process, we obtained the nodes and edges for the 2 networks, representing the characters and indicating their relationships. The network for chapters 1 to 40 has 56 nodes and 287 edges, while the one for chapters 1 to 71 grows larger. It has 108 nodes and 2,951 edges. To analyze the significance of each character, we used degree centrality and eigenvector centrality to identify the 10 most influential members. We also applied betweenness centrality and clustering coefficient to detect weak ties within the network.
In the initial stage of our network analysis, we first calculated the degree centrality of each character to identify the most directly connected and socially active individuals. Song Jiang had the highest score in both stages, which led us to initially infer that he might play a central role in the story. Building on this, we further compared the distribution of eigenvector centrality between chapter 1 to 40 and the chapter 1 to 71 to explore the evolution of power within the Liangshan network in greater depths. Unlike degree centrality, which counts direct connections, eigenvector centrality looks at whether someone is connected to other influential individuals. Being connected to important nodes will also make you important as well. That's why we use this metric to show each character's potential level of power in the Liangshan network. In the early stage, most characters had very low eigenvector centrality, below 0.05, meaning they were still on the edge of the network. At the same time, a few people had much higher values, above 0.25, showing that early influences was mainly held by just a few key figures who controlled how information and resources flowed. In the blue chart on the right, the distribution of eigenvector centrality became flatter and more balanced, with most values ranging from 0.08 to 0.13. This suggests that influences was no longer concentrated in the hands of a few, but more evenly shared across the network. As more new members joined and built ties with existing leaders, Liangshan evolved from a structure dominated by a few key figures into a more collective and balanced structure, which is very different from the centralized hierarchy of an imperial court. Nevertheless, the chart still shows that a small number of individuals maintain relatively central positions in the network. To take a closer look at who held the most potential influence in each stage, we extracted the top 10 members with the highest eigenvector centrality scores at both stages and visualized them in this pair of bar charts as a way to reinforce the overall trend. In the first 40 chapters, Zhu Gui had the highest eigenvector centrality, indicating that he quickly became part of the core leadership circle by forming strong ties with other influential members early on. By chapter 71, Song Jiang had the highest engine vector centrality, but the gap between him and other top members remained minimal. This reflects a relatively balanced distribution of power in both stages, though the later network became slightly more equal and collaborative overall. In the next section, we will introduce clustering coefficient and betweenness centrality to further analyze how Song Jiang's influence evolved over time within the network. Before diving into the third set of comparison, we calculated the transitivity metric at two stages to briefly review the overall structural change of the Liangshan network. This graph-level metric measures how often a friend of my friend is also my friend, in other words, reflecting the overall level of clustering of a network. From chapter 1 to 40, the transitivity was 0.63, and it increased to 0.74 by chapter 71. This suggests that the network became more tightly connected over time. Unlike transitivity, clustering coefficient is a node-level metric that tells us whether a person's friends are also friends with each other. The two charts here showed clustering coefficients of the top 10 members that ranked by engine vector centrality, helping us understand their local connection patterns. Zhu Gui had relatively high clustering coefficients in both stages, suggesting he consistently stayed within close-knit group where trust and support were strong. This kind of structure is often described as bonding capital, based on strong ties. In the early stage, Song Jiang had a significantly lower clustering coefficient compared to other key members, indicating that the people he was connected to were not closely linked to one another. This structural position gave him greater potential to bridge information across different groups. He acted as a network broker, connecting different separate communities. This role laid the groundwork for his later rise of leadership. By chapter 71, Song Jiang's clustering coefficient increased, suggesting he had become part of the more cohesive and cooperative group. His role as a bridge or broker was weakening, and he began to occupy a more integrated position in the network. However, he still had the lowest clustering coefficient among the top 10, meaning he retained some broker-like qualities and continued to connect across group boundaries. Song Jiang's broker role will become more visible in the following visualizations. In the left graph, different colors represent different clusters, and the size of each node reflects its betweenness centrality. This metric measures how often a node lies on the shortest path between all pairs of nodes in the network. We can see that Song Jiang has the highest betweenness centrality as he connects many clusters and bridges multiple structural holes. This makes him a key broker in the network, playing a vital role in linking communities and integrating diverse resources. Many of his connections can be seen as weak ties. They are less embedded, low redundancy relationships that are especially effective for connecting different social circles. This position allowed him to accumulate what is known as bridging capital, giving him a strategic advantage early on. However, by chapter 71, the overall network structure has shifted. The connections between nodes are denser and more evenly distributed. The network no longer depends on a few key connectors to bridge fragmented clusters. As integration increases, Song Jiang's role as a broker becomes less prominent. Instead of acting as a bridge or broker between separate groups, he became an organizer within a larger unified collective. These two graphs show a clear shift in Liangshan's power structure, from a fragmented system led by a few to a more balanced and cooperative network with shared power and stronger cohesion.
After knowing the power evolution in Liangshan, you may wonder how such a large anti-government group was formed. Actually, forming this group was a challenging process. Many heroes underwent profound consciousness changes as they joined Liangshan. We believe that this kind of consciousness change can be understood as a complex contagion. Unlike the spread of virus, this type of contagion requires more than just one infected neighbor. A person is likely to adopt a new behavior only when several people around them have already done so. Hu Yanzhuo is a typical character who underwent such changes. Initially sent by the imperial court to attack Liangshan, he was influenced by others, underwent an ideological shift, and finally joined Liangshan. We built networks based on chapters 54 to 58 to illustrate this process. They contain all the relevant plots and offer ideal data to study his complex ideological transformation. Assuming that characters appearing with Hu Yan in the same chapter influence his motives to join Liangshan, we filtered out irrelevant characters and selected those who influence Hu Yan as network nodes. However, this led to too many nodes, complicating the analysis. Based on our understanding, the initial 13 characters who interacted with Hu Yan had the most significant influence on his motivation. Thus, we chose to focus on these nodes and examine their ongoing influence on him. Centered on Hu Yan, we created 12 directed edges from the 13 nodes to Hu Yan, representing the influence he received from these characters. This formed our directed network. To measure the character's influence on Hu Yan, we assigned each node 2 attributes, the relationship type with Hu Yan and the cumulative influence on him. Based on our understanding of the plots, we categorize the relationships between these characters and Hu Yan into 2 types, enemy or friend. We update the relationship attributes based on the evolving plot. Since these relationships change, we divided their influence on Hu Yan into 3 stages, which we will explain later. We measure the cumulative influence of each character on Hu Yan by counting the number of times they appear in the same paragraph with him. Each co-occurrence equals 1 unit of influence. We use this to assign the weight of the edge between the character and Hu Yan. Higher weights indicate greater influence. Based on the process described, we generated 3 distinct directed and weighted ego networks centered on Hu Yan. These networks show how complex and evolving relationships influenced Hu Yan, leading to his gradual ideological shift and eventual decision to join Liangshan. Then we will further interpret these 3 networks of different stages. In stage 1, Hu Yan attacks Liangshan as a government general, fully opposing Liangshan. Therefore, for him, joining Liangshan was a risky and unproven choice. At this stage, Liangshan's heroes, depicted in blue, were his opponents, while his subordinates Han Tao and Peng Qi supported him, as shown by the orange edges. Song Jiang, the core leader of Liangshan, was Hu Yan's main enemy. Interestingly, we found they had strong connections. This implies that there was frequent and close interaction between the two. We indicate that Song Jiang had a strong influence on Hu Yan's ideological shift. Meanwhile, Han Tao and Peng Qi, Hu Yan's main subordinates, had strong and stable relationships with him. These relationships also significantly influenced his attitudes and behaviors in the early stage. So Hu Yan faced influences from both his enemies and friends. But these influences were scattered and not strong enough to change his mind. In stage 2, the situation began to change. We noticed the changes of 2 key nodes that had a significant influence on Hu Yan, Han Tao and Peng Qi. Their relationship with Hu Yan shifted from friends to enemies. That's because they joined Liangshan and became part of the group against Hu Yan. This sudden change was a strong psychological shock for Hu Yan. His former close and trusted subordinates had now turned to the enemy side. This contrast may have prompted him to start reconsidering the idea of joining Liangshan. Based on the legitimacy factor of complex contagion, we interpret that as Hu Yan's acquaintances switched sides, the idea of joining Liangshan, which he once thought was unacceptable, started to seem more reasonable and even worth considering. This sets the stage for his final decision in stage 3. Stage 3 is chapter 58. The network turns orange, indicating Hu Yan has fully experienced the complex contagion process. Influenced by those around him, he decided to join Liangshan and build friendly relationships with the others. He accepted the risky idea of rebelling against the government because he saw many people, especially those close to him, making the same choice and supporting his decision. That's all for our interesting findings. Thank you. This is our reference list.